All right, this is the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every episode, we talk to the experts. We also talk about marketing, social, digital, the ever-changing landscape. This show is no different. As always, I'm joined by producer Will. Will, how are we feeling?
Feeling pretty good, all things considered. But it does kind of feel like that, like after Christmas Day, before New Year's, where you're just not really sure what the next move is. It's kind of that in-between time. Things are starting to open up. Things are staying closed.
There's definitely the sense of light at the end of the tunnel, but we don't know exactly when that light will get closer, or is it further away? So I definitely feel you on that. Yeah. But we have a lot of fun stuff planned on the pod over the next couple of weeks. You've been hard at work and appreciate that, but we have some high-level, C-level execs coming on the program from, help me out here, Jersey Mike, Swiss Army Knife, Roan, who else am I missing?
PepsiCo, Dish Network, and I'm sure we're missing a couple. But yeah, we have 3 panels scheduled currently, each with like 3 to 4 to 5 people, all kind of talking about different industries and what's going on in the landscape.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty good. It's going to be awesome. We are going to be talking to them about really, how they pivoted and innovated during this time. How they led their different teams through this. And I think the big thing is what did we learn during this time and what's going to continue to evolve and continue to be the norm as we go forward as well. So looking forward to that. That will be some great content for all of our amazing listeners. But for this, what do we call these again? In between episodes, mini episodes?
Yeah, we never landed on an official name, I think. Mini episode was the leader.
So we're doing a mini episode today, just talk about some interesting things that I've been talking about, have heard from colleagues, clients, just the industry as a whole. So looking forward to get into it. So Will, although we're not in the office, we talk daily and we text back and forth about maybe topics or ideas that we can expand on. So I'm excited to break it down. So as I always say, Will, what do we got?
Yeah, we got a pretty good rundown today. A few topics. The first one, upcoming events, whether it's sporting events, conferences, what have it, going virtual, doing Zoom stuff. What's that going to look like? How long is that going to last? And everything that goes into that.
Yeah, so this has been something that every single brand has now been forced to think about as all events are not able to happen, from a Coachella to a Comic-Con to a South by Southwest, to maybe even a light gathering with the press. If you're trying to screen one of your new movies, everything's going virtual. You may have saw what Twitter did for The Last Dance was kind of cool. They were sending Chicago pizza to certain people and telling people to use the hashtag The Last Dance on Twitter to a select amount of influencers to kind of make that a virtual event, in a sense, like a watch party, if you will. We've seen what Twitch has done with all Amazon Prime shows. You can now watch with your friends. There's a third-party extension, Netflix Watch Party. But it's something that a lot of my colleagues and clients, everybody's asking about this. How do we create these virtual events? How do we create these second screen experiences? And there's a couple things. It's the only digital showrooms, right, for different products and things like that. So it's the only way, you and I are doing it with these different panels that we're producing and webinars. We're doing the podcast over Zoom right now. Usually we do that in the office in our studio. So I think at every level, from a TV network to a apparel brand to a sports team, everybody's asking the question, like, how do we move our event virtual? And, from STN's standpoint, as you know, Will, we've been inundated with those requests all across different industries, because people are now coming to the social, digital, virtual, live stream experts because they now have to. They don't really have a choice. So that's the first part. The second part is, I think people are realizing how much money they can actually save by going virtual. So if you used to have rent out, a hotel lobby, and you had hors d'oeuvres and you had staff and you had, all these different trinkets around, and it cost you, I don't know, $50,000 to set up that party for the press. If you can do something virtual, can you pull it off for, I don't know, a couple grand? So I do think, although this has changed how we market and how we eventize different things, it's going to be a part of the norm as companies look to slash budgets. Do we really need to drop $100K on said event?
I think it's getting close to the norm. I was watching TV the other night, and on the after show, they had the cast come in and they zoomed in and they had graphics built in, and they actually did a really good job with it. And after 2 minutes, I was like, oh, they're not in the same room anymore because they can't be. So I think people, you have to adjust. And I guess my biggest question for like a Coachella or a Comic-Con or whatever, obviously you get people to buy tickets, but what are you going to do, like Twitter sending pizzas? What are you going to do to get me to join and not watch something else and actually, Skype or Zoom into your event? How are you going to figure that out to get
Yeah, I
to
think,
entice people to join?
again, the word eventize, how do we make this special? And how do we make it where you feel excited? I mean, that's where I think, when let's go back to like film, for instance. You would invite the press to a screening, right? And you would have a panel of your actors, maybe before or after, ready to answer questions from the audience. You would have hors d'oeuvres, you would have cocktails, you would, feed the press and give drinks to the press and things like that, and make a nice environment for your event. So you're going to have to be creative, and we're going to have to be creative too as we talk about this stuff from an event standpoint. Do you send a really, really well thought out package to these people's homes? And does that package have a cocktail kit? And does that package have some different trinkets from the show and different things that you can maybe like Twitter did, throw in the oven, some pizza, watch The Last Dance with the Chicago-based pizza, and make sure to use the hashtag. Is it like the Willy Wonka golden ticket where you feel special and you get the exclusive invite that you type into your browser and it opens up this experience? Do you have, a musician or a DJ start off the experience so it kind of feels like you're entering this room in a way? So those are all things that I think, like anything when it comes to marketing, you're going to have to be creative with. Because I agree, if you just like send a link out to your email list, like, hey, Comic-Con people, join us for this boring live webinar, like it's not going to feel like you're a part of something. But, even San Diego, I think they did a local beer tasting virtual event. Usually, obviously, it's in person, but they sent, beer via package and different things like that. So, it's going to be interesting how people get creative and innovative, because putting on the virtual event isn't as difficult from a tech standpoint. But to your point, so many people are going live. So many people are doing this. How do you make it special?
Yeah, I went to Comic-Con last year, and I think 80% of it is so cool seeing all the people that are there and they wait all year for it. So how are you going to try to capture a small percentage of that, in a Zoom? And it's doable, but it's certainly going to take some creative marketing to do that.
Yep.
Next topic, similar, but how will sports on TV change from no audience to also maybe having people zoom into the games, maybe not having the announcers in the same room, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we talked a lot about with this. And if you haven't listened to it, great podcast with Bonnie Bernstein. I thought she was great, Will. Great guest. Had a lot of great positive vibes that she was bringing onto the show. And I got some great feedback from a lot of people in the industry. She brought up a great point, which was there's going to be now a gap in the sports broadcasts. If you think about, I use Wisconsin as the example. They have the minute or two where they play the jump around song and the whole the whole stadium's jumping around, right? In baseball specifically, it's such a slower sport. You're relying on the seventh inning stretch. You're relying on fans' reactions or the foul ball catch where the dad gives it to his daughter. Those moments are now going to be gone. So how are you going to fill those gaps? And I think from a broadcast standpoint, Bonnie made a great point is, are we now going to be relying more on gambling and different odds and numbers in that regard that the play-by-play booth can cut to? Are we going to be bringing in a select amount of people that are considered the diehard fans? And I use this example all the time. Remember when the Warriors played the Raptors? What is it, Jurassic Park they call it, I think, out there in Toronto?
Yeah.
Whether they were playing in Toronto or the Warriors, Jurassic Park was bumping, and they would cut there from the broadcast to get that real-time reaction. Fans are not going to inherently film themselves with their selfie the whole game, but, do you set up a contest that, hey, we're looking for the top 10 Packers fans of all time right now. And if you win that contest, we're going to ask you to film yourself and that we can actually cut to on the Fox broadcast.
Well, the NFL did that during the draft, and they didn't. It was slightly used. They didn't go out to those people or anything, but they were in the background and they got featured. That's a pretty cool prize to win.
But what I've been telling a lot of our clients is like, I watched the Barstool reaction videos in real time when the Yankees played the Astros. And, I saw the Astros hit a home run and I was watching my second screen experience. I'm watching the Barstool live stream and I'm about 3 seconds before them or 10-second delay. So I just could not wait to see their reaction. And they, of course, fall on the ground and they're cursing and they're throwing stuff at the TV. But there's something for me anyways, and I'm not sure as a sports fan if you agree, there's something so intoxicating about diehard sports fans reacting to sports moments, whether it's good or bad. And I think that's going to be a huge miss. And they're going to have to figure out from a broadcast standpoint how to incorporate that into their broadcasts.
Yeah, that's a huge part of either going to a bar, going to someone's house for a big playoff game or whatever. So, yeah, are you going to bring in like the NBA? Can you bring in Dwayne Wade to do a couple minutes of commentary or tell a story while the game's going on in the background, or live giveaway, or what can you do to not only get people in the door, but to keep them in the door also? And
then finally, Joe Buck said recently that Fox Sports will pump in fake crowd noise to make it seem more. But I'll say UFC, they last weekend, I watched that. There was no fans. It's a little awkward at first, but then you start hearing the corner. You start hearing more of the maybe talk between the fighters. And I thought it was great. I mean, for me, I didn't really miss it. But UFC is tight as far as the camera shot. They have the cage, of course, so you really don't see the fans. But again, when you think about a baseball or a football or a basketball, it's definitely going to be missed. But XFL, like I told Bonnie, they shot tight. They really didn't rely on fan reaction. So although I don't think it's enough where people won't watch sports because they can't get the fan reaction, I do think there's going to be a missing element that second screen experiences potentially, or the broadcast can pipe in. To go back to UFC, I'm sure they couldn't have planned for this, but I thought the same thing. I texted Ben. I said, no crowd. This is kind of weird. And then after the first round or two, you get used to it.
This is actually pretty cool. You can hear the trainers telling them what to do. You can kind of hear the guys talking in the ring a little bit.
Yeah,
you could hear the comment. It was great.
And one of our friends over at NBC Sports made a brilliant point. A lot of the Olympics does not have fans, if you think about it. Like some of those swimming and those diving competitions, right. There's not, 10,000 fans in the audience. Again, the broadcast shoots tight, and they do so. And you enjoy it more than any other sporting event. The Olympics is like all eyes are glued on that. So, I don't think it's going to be as big of a void as people are talking about. However, again, from a sports standpoint, people are going to be really thirsty for those diehard fan reactions. And whether it's on the broadcast or whether it's something else, I think that'll be important to figure out. Did you see any of the Korean Baseball League at all? I put on a couple innings, but it's not bad.
It's not bad, but they also did a pretty good thing where they put the cardboard cutouts in the background, which looks better than empty seats. And I think they did something if you have season tickets or you can enter a contest to get yourself. And that's what a lot of sports teams that are, first of all, baseball. I mean, a majority of the revenue comes from the gate. So that's really going to hurt to not have anybody in the stands. But how do you incentivize some of your season ticket holders, some of your exclusive members that have paid memberships to get exclusive things? It seems silly. It seems absurd we're talking about this. But, for the Phillies, as you're rocking that hat, if Will Kelly's face was on a cardboard cutout right behind home plate, and as you're watching TV, you see your face, that's pretty hilarious. And is that incentive enough for you to say, okay, I'm not going to cancel my membership because this is pretty awesome? So, again, creativity, being innovative. It seems absurd to talk about cardboard cutouts and plastering your face on a cardboard cutout, but desperate times call for desperate measures. I think they had some sponsorship elements in there too, so a good way to kind of get a little bit of that gate back. Because I think Bill Simmons talked about it on his podcast. I think it's 40%. They said is the around average. Huge number. Gate fee. Yeah. Yep. Number 3, how broadcast and production will change. I feel like we kind of covered that, but more in the nitty gritty. Like, yes, are they going to be in the same room? Are they going to zoom in? How will advertising work? So I think this entire situation, this pandemic, is going to change broadcasting forever. I may have said it on Bonnie's podcast, but does SportsCenter really need $100 million set, or can Scott Van Pelt, knock that out in the second bedroom of his house, right? Like I think especially these talking head shows, First Take, The Jump, Skip and Shannon, at the very least, I just don't think they need these multi-million-dollar sets. I don't know if they necessarily need any more
these 30-person production crews, I think it's going to get a lot more truncated in terms of, all right, what do we actually need to pull this off? Because I'm watching a lot of, PTI type shows as well. And a lot of times they're remote if Will Bond's out at an NBA Finals game or what have you. And it's just as good. I don't miss the fact that they're sitting across the table from each other. So like I mentioned, The Last Dance is a piece of art. It's gorgeous. It's 4K cameras. It's, renting out Airbnbs for MJ. It's going to Steve Kerr's house and getting that beautiful shot. But when you're talking about daily programming, especially if it's talking head stuff or news, Cuomo on CNN, the guy was doing it from his basement for 3 weeks or so because he had COVID. So does CNN again need to have a huge team, a huge staff and a multi-million-dollar set to have Cuomo sit at a desk every day and fly people in, especially the flying people in, Will? I think, when it comes to like guys like Woj and Mel Kiper, it's always going to make sense, I think, just to set them up with a camera and have them be able to just zoom in and get some decent lighting. There's no reason why you need to fly people in studio unless it's like a very special type show.
Well, Woj isn't staying at the Motel 6 either. He's probably got that written to his contract where he gets a pretty nice meal and a pretty nice hotel everywhere he goes. To go back to your first point, though, Erica Nardini, the Barstool CEO, she goes, how many times have you dressed up in a suit and sat across the table from your friend and had a sports discussion? Never. It's not the normal thing. You're on a couch, you're at a bar.
And so Barstool's doing the rundown right now using FaceTime, I think, or Zoom as well. And it's great. I mean, they have the same banter back and forth.
That's how you talk with your friends. Yeah, it's at a bar, it's on a couch. So it does give you more of that relatable feeling, I think, too. And if it can save you a ton of money in the back end, can't hurt.
We tried something different here, Will. So we're IG living this. So we're recording this behind the scenes. Laney Johnson says, could MLB renegotiate their TV deal to counter some of the revenue loss for admissions? I think the answer there is no. Although they would love to counterbalance the fact that they're not getting any gate right now. What's the incentive for the TV to pay more money? I just don't see why they would renegotiate that right now, especially as the marketplace advertisers are pulling more money back. So ESPN has paid for these rights and Fox has paid for these rights, but it's not as lucrative as it once was because a lot of the huge companies, the Fortune 500 brands, are pulling back some of their advertising spend. So those commercials are how they offset the rights deals, and those commercials are now harder to fill.
Yeah, I'm sure they're talking just to the networks every day about what the plan is going to be. But yeah, the networks are in the same position. They can't, their hands are tied until the actual product gets back on the field. And they've already lost, 6 weeks worth of games that they are just.
And for the MLB and NBA, they're going to have salary discussions because they can't pay these, even at the NBA level. If they can't have fans for the next year, you can't pay LeBron $35 million a year. It just doesn't work anymore. So maybe for the next year, LeBron's salary goes down to, as much as this hurts, goes down to $17.5 million. And then, the salary cap gets adjusted when things get back to normal. But same with the NBA. A lot of these local teams rely very heavily on the gate. And with revenue sharing, the Lakers and the Warriors and some of the bigger teams, some of these franchises are getting up towards $20 to $25 million per year just from revenue sharing, and they're not going to get that dollar amount at all this year or next.
Do you think they could do something like the NBA has the jersey ad patches now? What if you add a second patch, a third patch, and the MLB you add one patch, and that's just a small way to maybe get some of that back?
No, it's a really good point. Again, we're going to have to be innovative. We're going to have to be creative, and they're going to have to find different ways to make money. And this is going to revolutionize sports where maybe they don't rely as much on the gate anymore in any one sport. It's like icing on the cake. But to your point, they do such a good job of monetizing every possible asset that they have that they can bridge the gap for the next year or so. And then once they get back to, 20,000 people in the stands, like post-vaccine, they're now going to be better off because they've now monetized all those opportunities.
Maybe you ever see like those Eastern, like European basketball leagues and the whole jersey is just ads.
That's what Premier League and all those guys, they figured it out.
Speaking of the future, what do you think? I guess just marketing as a whole, but like e-com, social, app, how do you think that's all going to look this year and next year? And how are they going to continue to scale that?
Well, listen, I think it's accelerated how important these things are. And if you didn't invest in your app, if you didn't invest in a relationship with Grubhub or Uber Eats, if you didn't invest in a true e-commerce, paid media marketing strategy, your business may be bankrupt right now, which is super sad, right? But if you took it kind of seriously, but we're going to work on it later, it now just fast forwarded. And we've talked to some food and beverage brands already, Will, over the last few weeks, and it's flipped, right? So, where they used to only have a small portion of their money or their revenue come from delivery or pickup, now it's 100% of their revenue overnight across the globe. So, yeah, I really think that these things that I've been screaming about for the last 10 years or so, how important it is, those brands that didn't take it as important, it's now just like accelerated. Like if you don't figure it out literally this year, then you may be completely left behind. So e-commerce, your own app, delivery when it comes to food, and then e-commerce from a brand level too. Like, do you own the ability to reach your audience and make sure you can control your own destiny when it comes to sales and things like that. So yeah, it's accelerated all that.
I always go back to movie theaters and to the point you made earlier of why do we need these massive sets? Why do we maybe need a gigantic movie theater with 10 screens when I can just sit on my couch and maybe pay you 10 or 20 bucks and watch the movie? And are they going to start to I know there was some stuff with AMC and the whole Trolls thing last week or 2 weeks ago, but yeah, is that going to be something that gets affected in the future of those two industries butting heads?
Especially if Amazon buys AMC, you hear that? That would change the game.
But that will affect me as an AMC A-list.
That's right. Have to figure out if your membership still works. This is what's really interesting about this time right now is if you want to talk about how to educate a population at scale for technology, I mean, what has happened over the last 60 days is incredible. You're talking about 35-year-olds that joined TikTok for the first time, and they're now doing weekly dance challenges. You're talking about the 54-year-old that's a mother of four that now is on Instagram daily. But how about the 74-year-old grandmother that is doing Zoom happy hours with their grandkids or joining these FaceTimes and these Facebook watch parties? Like, what's really interesting is the millennials and different age groups, they understood it, but this is really accelerated because now the older demographic has had 60 days that they have to figure out if they want to communicate with their loved ones. So now they've kind of taught themselves, like, what's this Zoom thing? And now everybody has virtual backgrounds. And now I feel like everybody I've talked to has been on a Zoom call. That's a really important thing that I think not a lot of people are talking about is this pandemic has forced everybody to get more technical acumen, and with more technical acumen, broadens the market share, broadens the marketplace where social and digital and digital marketing, all these things are now just open to a wider net. And there's no way you could have done that at scale from an educational standpoint unless the world just happened to stop for 2-3 months, which it literally did across the globe.
I had a Zoom Mother's Day call with my grandma and everyone in my family, and we had to do a test run with me and my cousin and her the day before to make sure she knew how to do it. But yeah, she had no idea what Zoom was before that, or you could even do that. My grandpa walked in and goes, "How can you guys see me?" So he never would have ever used that.
But think about that for a second. Like the beer festival, maybe it caters to a somewhat older audience. There's no way they would be able to figure out some type of virtual thing and click on a link and get their webcam going. But now they can. So for all these businesses, now that that's an actual reality for any demographic, does that become a huge part of your strategy? Even if you have the Comic-Cons and the South by Southwest, do you now do monthly virtual events that you can charge for, get more money for, because you know everybody in America knows how to open up a Zoom now? Like that part is extremely important for revenue, for business opportunity, the fact that an entire population potentially has now been educated on how to enter a live stream. Like that's a big deal.
I mean, I wonder how many new users Twitter and Instagram, Facebook got the last 6 weeks. Just
well, social consumption, last time I checked, was up 40%. And Zoom went from 10 million active users to 100 million or something like that. It's just, that's a big change. And again, it's not so much about Zoom as an entity. It's about a population being educated on how to engage from a social, from a digital, from an online standpoint. And that's going to be, you want to talk about increasing your market share as a company, no better time than either during this or after post-COVID. It's going to just open up a lot of interesting opportunities.
I'm going to say, to give Zoom a lot of credit, basically scaled their company 10 times almost without a hitch in
Yeah.
a week, 2 weeks.
Because you're right. If it would have had a bunch of bugs early on, people would have bailed. But high
Yeah.
quality, very little buffering, the ability to do podcasts like these and webinars, although they had a little bit of issues with the privacy concerns. I agree. I
Fixed
mean,
it quickly, though.
yep.
We used to use Google, Skype, and now we're
Mm-hmm.
majority Zoom.
Yep.
Last couple things here on the agenda. How about
By the way, on
brands?
IG Live, you're
Thinking-
like half your face is for our six attendees.
Where was I at? Brands. Brands leaning more on agencies. Brands maybe hiring more. Brands scaling up during this whole time. And
Yeah,
how
I
they're
think for
affecting their
what's
business.
really interesting for our company at STN, I think we're really going to get an influx and have the ability to double, triple our company if we choose to, because a lot of companies are going to be not wanting to add headcount, which is understandable when your revenue was affected as much as it was. So I think for a lot of agencies and third parties, a lot of these companies will be leaning on outsourced, bandwidth. I think there's a lot of brands and there's a lot of companies that were really passionate about keeping everything internal, which, is understandable for certain companies. But talked to a lot of people in the space and they said like it's always easier to get money than increase headcount. So I think, a lot of companies are not going to want to increase headcount for the rest of the year. But guess what? They still got to market their big film. They still got to have, large initiatives around their new TV shows or their new products. And marketing doesn't stop. You have to continue to market your products in order to survive. So although you can't add headcount, you still have to market. So they're going to have to reach out to third parties to do that. So I think it'll be interesting for agencies like us, the influx and opportunity, because these brands are going to want to limit headcount based on what happened and if this thing has a second wave and things like that.
Well, and you have to market maybe in a way you've never done before. If you're a movie studio, you can market a movie to a theater all day long, but now you have to market to an at-home audience and I mean, that's a whole new thing and a whole new lift that you can't just go out and hire people for ASAP. So yeah, that's where the agency aspect comes in. Will come in a lot.
Yeah, and listen, as an agency, the cool thing is if times get rough, you can always cancel the agency relationship. Now, if you hire 15 employees instead, that's a headline if you're a company and you're laying off 5% or 15 people. So that's always been, a lot of our clients, I think why they've hired us from an agency standpoint is just that. If the project goes under, they can essentially say, hey, we don't need your services anymore. But if everything's done internally, if a project goes away, and that happens a lot even with agencies. They have McDonald's as the agency of record. McDonald's goes to a new agency and the agency then has to lay off 40 people, which is sad, right? So that'll be interesting how that all shakes out.
Final rundown topic, remote working, which we actually just got a question about, but yeah, how's that going to work in the future? How is that going to look for the next couple of weeks, the next year? How is it going to affect? Is it more efficient, less efficient?
Yeah, we got a question here on our IG Live. Are we now going to go IG Live for every recording? I think so. Squid24 says, what are your thoughts on companies now finding the most of their workforce working from home? Do you think there will be some permanent changes? 100%. Commercial real estate is going to have a huge problem, I think, over the next couple of years, especially if you have a huge headquarters in Manhattan and you're paying $200,000 a month for some beautiful high rise for a lease. I think, what has happened, as my dog goes absolutely nuts in the background. I think what's happened is these older executives that just didn't believe in work from home and thought that if the person's not in a seat, they're not working, they're taking naps, or they're not performing. It's forced them to experiment during this time. And now it's like, oh shoot, if we were productive, which everything I hear from all my colleagues in the space is everybody's pretty damn productive. Nobody's like, yeah, man, I can't get my staff to focus. Like, I haven't heard that at all. It'll be interesting to see after COVID and when people feel more secure with their jobs, if certain industries just maybe don't work from home as productively. But like with our company, Will, I think you'll agree, we had the work from home Wednesday already established and we have a great workforce, but everybody's been more productive, if not more productive, working from home. There's certain things like I have to rely on your home internet connection. And if we have a client call, you may be buffery and it's not your fault, just maybe your current internet plan. But maybe companies start to pay employees for high-speed internet and get the best level so there's no issues on client calls. And then brainstorming, I know for me and for us, is a little bit more difficult when you're not in one big room and can whiteboard. But it's going to change. I mean, again, talking about accelerating when it comes to remote working, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's going to change our industry, going to change work in general as far as how we work as employees.
One thought I had, if you're a more traditional, like larger company, maybe like in the finance industry, if you gave all your employees this time to work from home, and then at some point you're going to take that away from them, are you going to have like an HR backlash from these people unite and say, look, we need some kind of policy where 1 day a week, 2 days a week, I have kids, I want to work from home. We've already shown that it works and we've shown that it's efficient. And is that gonna be some kind of a headbutt there?
Yeah, and I think even at STN, we have dedicated workstations. So you have your desk and you may have your Laker flag on it and you kind of have your home, which I think is a cool thing. But are we going to move now to a more work from like a WeWork situation where there's docking stations and there's screens and there's nice desks, but there's not really a Will Kelly desk per se? Because right now, if we got back in the office, which we're nowhere near that, but if we did, if you and Matt came in and there's only 2 people in our entire office, it doesn't work because you guys sit right next to each other. But that's your desk, right? So if we want to have the 6-foot distancing, it'd be much better if Matt sat where he sat and you sat over there by my office, and then the distance is amazing, right? So It'll be interesting if companies like ours, do we strip out the desk, get longer benches, we're able to sanitize more effectively, we're able to spread out when needed, especially now. And has that become the norm where we come in for big meetings, we come in for brainstorms, maybe we come in for Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we all come in the morning till noon, and then we all go back to our home and finish the day out. Like all that stuff, I think for us is potential based on productivity, but for every company, it's got to be something they're thinking about.
Are you sure this isn't just part of your master plan to have a full-size basketball court in the office?
Yeah, exactly.
Get rid of all the desks.
Get rid of all the desks. No, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, it's even for me. Like I was big on remote working. We have remote people in Florida, and where's Trey these days? Tulsa, I think. We have Mary Page out in New York, and that's worked fine. And we had our work from home Wednesdays, but it's definitely going to increase. There's going to be more work from homes for our company, but every company I talk to, it's like, why do we need this $50,000 lease or $100,000 lease, or why are we spending all this money on office space, which again is going to extremely hurt the commercial real estate game. But for businesses, they're probably going to get a lot more efficient. Who was someone you and I talked to recently? I won't mention the name, but one of our panel guests that we have coming up, he mentioned we're being productive now, but once the kids go back to school, right? And once we're not going through a pandemic, which is very mentally and emotionally draining, can we get even more productive, right? So it's proven that we're hanging on pretty tight, but if the kids aren't screaming in the background and you're not worried about your health and the health of your mother and grandmother and things like that, don't forget about dad and grandpa, of course. But, I think that puts you in a much better mindset where you could be even more productive potentially.
I'd like to hear from one of the panel guests, because we already had that infrastructure, the work from home Wednesday, and now it's just ramped up, obviously. But we already, as a company, knew what to do. You got to be a little bit more communicative with your Slack and all that kind of stuff. But for a company who just went from strictly office for 50 years to now no office at all, how was that on day 1? How was it on day 5?
Yeah, we would have stumbled out of the gates too, because like we started, before we did the work from home Wednesday thing, we said, okay, you have to have your phone on you. It's as if I'm walking to your desk, so you have to have that same communication, right? Nothing can change. If you're going to run, you can't be running a bunch of errands and stuff, and like you have to be working at your desk. You have to make sure your Slack update's on point. You got to make sure you're answering your phone. Like, we have Rike, we have Slack, we have these systems, video conferencing, that allows us to be just as productive. But if we would have, even at STN, if we would have just went straight from all in office to strictly remote, we would have had some hiccups where people, it's innocent. They're not like trying to not be a good worker, not trying to not communicate, but it's just like an innocent mistake. Oh, my phone was on silent. Oh, I forgot to open up Slack at 8:30, and that can affect communication and have a domino effect. So
we're also a pretty tech savvy company. Everyone here is pretty tech efficient. I think for some companies where people maybe don't even have a laptop or use that, there could have been a lot of problems calling into meetings.
My dad is 66 years old. He never had a laptop. And now he has a laptop and he can crank out bids from home, and he's like freaking out like, David, it's so cool, man. I can pull off the side of the road and I don't have to use my secretary. And it's like, that's great though. That's great for their company now because they're going to be much more mobile, where before they were much more archaic in terms of like office, secretary, handwritten stuff, and now can all be done digitally.
Yeah, it just became a habit over the course of 100 years, 50 years, and now it's the Band-Aid's ripped off.
Yep.
That was everything I had on our rundown. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to touch on, but
that is it.
Zoe,
that's enough. Again, this is the problem. We're working from home, but you got dogs barking in the background. You got all that stuff. No, I just like we always say, hope you guys are all safe and healthy. What we try to do, as you can tell by this program, we're trying to look at the positives, the light in the tunnel, the glass half full. What have we learned from this? And that'll be a constant theme, Will, I think, with our panels coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'm really excited, just learning from high-level, C-level executives at large Fortune 500 brands, essentially. What did they learn? How is their business going to pivot? Because I think any company can learn from that. And that's what we've tried to be extracting from our partners and colleagues, and just try to share with you guys, the listeners, what we've heard on calls and things like that. So I'm excited we were able to bring some value, hopefully, to the good people. Thanks to Will Kelly. We still thank David Furker every single time we do these. And we hope that you listen on iTunes and rate us 5 stars. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. Any last words, Will Kelly?
I'll say I don't know how much crossover there's between your Instagram following and your podcast following, but I think it's safe to say the panels we're doing next week are by far the biggest thing we've ever done in the history of the podcast. And I think it's going to be really, really not only helpful, but also just interesting from a business standpoint. So definitely excited for.
Yeah, we'll cut those highlights down separately from each of we'll get the main highlights, but we'll have the full panel as well. Knocking out a bunch of panels, a lot of episodes over the next couple of weeks, so you guys will enjoy it. This has been another edition of the Business Social Podcast, powered by STN Digital. I'm David Brickley. Thanks for listening.